Happy Monday, degenerate gamblers. Welcome back to the Die Hard MMA podcast. We are here. We are hanging out. We are ready to go. And whoop, baby, do we have a fresh, juicy dumpster to dive into this week. You know, I was thinking about it, you guys. I was thinking about it. And maybe I'm just feeling myself, you know, because I'm wearing the baby blues. We locked up another win this past week. We cashed another max bet. Guys, I'm on a 2-event winning streak. You know that? A 2 UFC event winning streak. And yes, that's a technicality because I lost on the PFL this past weekend. So we're saying a 2 UFC specifically event win streak. It's the first win streak of 2024 and we're 7 months in, okay? I'm going to take it. I'm going to take what I can get. But I was thinking about it and I was just kind of sitting back and I'm like, you know what? It's been a while since we've had this kind of a trashy fight. You know, I've been scraping by. The big L's were kind of in the past behind us. They're on the big pay-per-view cards. The last couple of weeks, I've been chipping away. I've been scraping. I've been clawing and, you know, winning these little, you know, +1 unit type of nights on the nights that I win because I'm fighting for my life over here. I just needed a nice dumpster to dive into. I just needed a nice, fresh, juicy dumpster that you can smell from a half a block away to make my cash. And that's what this week is. And I like this card. And I know everyone's talking about how much they hate it and how gross this card is. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. I'm ready to go this week, you guys. I am so amped up. What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the show. We've got Mikey Jones. Dan, congrats on the 7-unit bet. Thank you very much, folks. If you didn't know, I shouted this one from the rooftops. It was weeks ago. I tried to let everybody know way in advance. I tried to prepare you guys. It was Peyton Talbot and Umar Nurmagomedov. 7-unit bet comes through easy peasy. And we are now 9-3 on the max bets here on this podcast. I've been doing this show for 6 damn years, and the record is 9-3. That's how few actual max bets I've ever made in my entire life. So when I do make a max bet, those are the ones, no matter what else is going on in my world, you might want to pay attention to. And Dixon Sider, my guy, he begged, he pleaded. He was like, please don't get Bedoya. Do not get Bedoya. You know, I got a little distracted by the abs, Dixon. It wasn't you. It was me. Rolando Bedoya's abs had me just way too infatuated. You tried to warn me. You're a good friend. I appreciate the effort, but sometimes I got to make my mistakes. You know me. I got to just step straight into the bear trap and get bit. That's how it goes, man. You tried to warn me. Thank you for trying to save me from myself. My guy Dream is in the house. We got the Grateful Dude. What's up, Iceland Farts? And we've got Mikey Jones, Mushroom MMA. What's going on? And Kakarot. Oh, don't get me started on Cheeto, man. Don't even get me started on Cheeto. You know, he comes out after the fight is over and talks about turning around and coming back too quickly. And it wasn't even something I considered. You know, he took an absolutely brutal ass kicking from Sean O'Malley. And in my mind, Cheeto is just this steel wall. It doesn't matter. He tanks damage like nobody I've ever seen before. So I know there's like an angle. It's like NFL teams coming off a Super Bowl loss. They suck the next season for like the first half of the year at minimum. It's like a known angle that's just point and click. If you lost the Super Bowl, you're going to have a slow start to the season. You're not going to do very well. You tried really hard. You got to the end. You worked your hardest and you didn't get the glory at the end of it. So now go back to the drawing board. There's just a lull that comes with that. And apparently that's a thing in MMA also. I thought Cheeto would not be the guy to fall victim to that. I thought Cheeto would be the guy that brushed off something like that and just came out to fight. And he did not. He came out a little too soon, apparently. And for a guy who generally gives away round 1, this time he gave away 1 and 2. So, Yeah, Cheeto came back too quick, and it was very, very, very unfortunate that a lot of us were in on Cheeto for this one. I think if that fight happens 6 months from now, we might get a different result. I know everyone's hyped up on Figueiredo right now, but frankly, I still think his days are numbered in this weight class. I'm not sure he's built for this weight class. Obviously, still a very caliber fighter, so I don't want to take anything away from him, but I do think he's too small still. I'll stand by that, right? I'll go down with the ship here on my read. How's everybody doing? Thank you all so much for being in here. 189 live viewers. Just to give you guys a little bit of a heads up, semi-short show tonight. Not by choice, but because fights are falling off this card left and right. So we're going to talk to you about every single fight that we can on the board, and we can, shoot the breeze a little bit if you guys want to, but we're probably going to package this one kind of nice and neat because we're about 3 fights short. So just bear with me on that one. But regardless, friend of the show, amazing guest, a guy that I look up to and absolutely love having around in the MMA space, a very, very positive figure here in the sport of MMA. Our guest this week is none other than Aaron Bronstetter from Sportsnet. Aaron, my guy, how are you doing today?
Yes, sir. I'm doing well. You know, it's a holiday here in Canada, civic holiday. So the last I heard, we lost the co-main event. What else did we lose? Did we lose anything else today on this card? What's the latest? I mean, I'm the one who should be informing people of this myself, but I'm at your mercy right now.
Yeah, no, we haven't lost anything besides the co-main event today. But I'm just talking about like Barlow was supposed to fight Euros Medic. We still don't have a rebooking for the Parsons Kiyoshida fight yet. So, we're down 3 at this point. Barlow got a fill in, thankfully, but losing the co-main event on this one hurts.
Yeah, that was a good fight. Anytime you can see one of the Basharat brothers, the Bash brothers, in action, it's always fun. I mean, I know that Javid just lost his first fight to a shout out my Sportsnet colleague Ayman Zahabi, and one of the bigger upsets of the year.
Yeah.
But I always enjoy watching Javid fight, so it's a bummer that one fell off.
Yeah, I'm really disappointed about that one, man, because frankly, I was very, very much looking to see how he was going to bounce back. I had this whole rant I was going to go on about, when you get undefeated fighters, they go one of 2 ways, right? Either they completely lose themselves, they lose that faith in themselves. It takes them a little while to find their game and get back on track, or they make a real quick turnaround. They take that veteran loss and go straight back to work, and you see a new, evolved, improved version of them. And I kind of expected the latter from Javid. I thought he was going to come out and show us kind of a new wrinkle and remind us who he was coming off that loss. So bummer. And I still don't know the details, Aaron. I don't know if you do or not. I just saw it was canceled. I don't know who or why. So I'm not sure who needs the replacement if we're going to be able to get that fight back on the card.
Yeah, I don't know the details just yet, but it's also the ATT version of the Basharat brothers, and I was curious to see what kind of new wrinkles they would have added to their game, having moved to Florida. So I guess we'll have to find out next time around.
Yep. We'll have to wait. But regardless, we do have plenty of other action to talk about, guys. If you don't know Aaron, I don't know what you're doing. You're living under a rock. You should know Aaron. Make sure you're supporting him on social media and things like that. He does awesome sit-down interviews with these fighters and a lot of great content covering the sport. This is Home of Fight, guys. Do me a favor and get subscribed if you have not, and hit the like button for us. We're going to talk some bets here for this week's card, UFC Vegas 95. First fight of the evening, we have got Stephanie Luciano taking on Talita Alencar. And if you feel like you've heard those names together before, Aaron, that's because you have. I really had to go back and remind myself what happened here because I felt like this sounded oddly familiar when I first just kind of glanced at it. It is Luciano's first fight off of Dana White's Contender Series. We've seen Talita Alencar since, but they just fought. This was a Dana White's Contender Series fight, and for whatever reason, the UFC is booking a rematch for Stephanie's UFC debut. And it was a really, really interesting fight. So it's a striker versus grappler matchup. You've got Stephanie, who is young, 24 years old, tall, long, lanky, vicious, brutal striker, likes to hurt people with her hands. And then you've got Talita Alencar, who is a short, stubby, grappling heavy jiu-jitsu player, 6-time world jiu-jitsu champion. So she is no scrub on the ground whatsoever. Absolutely knows what she's doing down there. But it's weird to have a 5-1-1 fighter take on a 5-0-1 fighter, especially when they just fought. If you think you've got anything from either of these competitors, why are you putting them right back in there against each other? I know the fight just got scored a draw, but you'd think you'd give them both a little time to marinate, set that one on the side, run it back in 2 or 3 fights, that kind of thing. So real weird move, in my opinion, by the UFC here on this one. But I'm interested because the betting line is so strange. For a fighter in Alencar who now has her UFC debut under her belt and was heavily favored the first time these two fought, she's a plus 160 underdog in this spot, Aaron. And I'm confused. Luciano showed real good cardio, real good ability to stay calm under pressure, and she fought her way back into that fight when Alencar ran out of gas. She about killed her in that third round, which led to it being a draw because it was a 10-8 round. And that was a hell of a back and forth scrap and a great showing from a young fighter. However, it was Dana White's Contender Series, and Alencar went out there with her foot nonstop on the gas and didn't really have a plan B. She just emptied the tank trying to get this girl out of there. And then when she couldn't, she had nothing left to give in round 3. She didn't give up on herself. She didn't quit. It was admirable for her to not get finished in that third round. But it really was the game plan, I feel like. I still feel like this fight should be a lot closer to a pick'em or Alencar slight favored. I know she's older, but she doesn't have a lot of MMA miles on her. The grappling disparity is still very large. A lot of jiu-jitsu players can't use their jiu-jitsu because they have no wrestling. She's training at MMA Masters. Her wrestling looks solid in the first fight. She can get the fight to the ground if she wants to. I kind of feel like this first fight is an easy dog shot to say, Talita won 2 out of 3 rounds in the first fight. She could do that again and just go 80% of what she did last time and save a little juice for round 3. She wins 29-28 more often than not if she doesn't get the finish. I'm confused by the line, man. I don't know if you can, bring some light to this. Am I missing something? Maybe you've got a different opinion. I think Alencar's the side here, though. What do you think?
Yeah, I very much have the same opinion as you. I mean, Alencar was minus 240 in their first fight. And like you said, she runs out of gas and then she has to kind of fight for her life in the third round. But the reason for that is because you're fighting on the Contender Series and you kind of have to empty the gas tank. You have to put your foot on the gas. In a fight like this, she's under UFC contract now. Like, she's not fighting for a contract. She's coming off a win. So she's not fighting to stay in the UFC. And I thought that her win against Yana Amanda, who I think is a good prospect, where she was the favorite in that fight, I thought she looked really good in that fight. So I'm with you. I think that this is a very surprising line because now she's going to be able to have room to operate in the way that she normally would, not having to fight, pedal to the metal, trying to win a UFC contract with Dana White in attendance. I would be surprised if Dana White's in attendance for this fight, period, because it's the first fight of an Apex card. And even if he is in the building, he'll probably won't be out on the floor until the main card. That's just typically what happens for him during any card, really, whether it's at the Apex or elsewhere. So the pressure is completely off of Alencar in this situation. She's had a lot of room to grow as a mixed martial artist because that fight is in the rearview mirror. She won her UFC debut, like you said, training at a good camp. I wasn't impressed with her record. I actually had picked Amanda to win that last fight when she had fought her because I thought Amanda was just a more polished veteran fighter. But I was really impressed with what Alencar was able to do in that fight. So I'm on the Alencar side here too, and I'm also, like you, very surprised by a line where she was minus 240 the first time. You have Luciano, who hasn't fought since and is now suddenly a nearly minus 200 favorite. It doesn't make any sense. Maybe people looked at that first matchup on Contender Series and thought it's a mismatch, but I think you also have to take into consideration the circumstances of that first fight when you're making that kind of assessment.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And different story if they run this fight again in 2 years. You know what I mean? You've got the younger fighter who's probably going to be making rapid improvements, working on that takedown defense, stuffing some of these attempts and stuff like that. But I just think this is too soon. I'm not sure she's going to have developed the takedown defense game enough to stop what Alencar wants to do and is already really freaking good at. So I'm glad we line up here on this one, Aaron. I really am. So I think we've got a live dog barking here on the very first fight of the evening. And I don't know how much you've been paying attention to this kind of stuff, Aaron, but it has been a dry patch here in 2024. Just this past week, your friend who knows nothing about the sport of MMA that clicked on, 10 favorites in a row, they feel like a genius this week and cashed the biggest parlay of their lives easy peasy, because that's the kind of year it's been. It really has been a chalk heavy year for bettors. So for guys like me, I'm getting my ass kicked because I can't find a dog on a card. Thank God Sam Hughes came through with the live bet action last week. But this card, I think, is the type of card where you might be able to spy a couple of those dogs. When you drop that bar a little bit, it's not quite the upper echelon of the UFC. You're not fighting contenders or people challenging for titles. People make mistakes, people slip up, and that's where some of these dogs I think are going to bark. And I think this week is probably a good one to look for that.
Yeah, this is a card that has a lot of volatility, and I think that's typically the spot where underdogs shine. So we'll see as the card goes on. I think there are a lot of good spots here. I'm not sure the next fight is one of those particular fights, but we'll get on that.
Let's get to it. The next fight is Jarno Errens, and it is taking on Youssef Zalal, the Moroccan devil himself. Zalal is an interesting situation here, Aaron. He's super intriguing because he had a tough go of it in the UFC the first time around. He ends up getting cut. He heads off to the regionals, and his team stood by him that whole time. You had fighters that were active in the UFC still talking about him after he had gotten released. He trains out of Factory X, very good, very solid, well-known gym. He goes out on the regional scene, does a kickboxing fight, does a boxing fight, gets 2 round 1 finishes in MMA, and so the UFC brings him back on short notice. And he takes on Billy Q, fan favorite Billy Q. And I smelled a trap a mile away, Aaron. That was one where he comes back against Billy, and everyone's piling in on Billy, but for some reason the line stayed pick him. And I was like, I'm not going to get caught by that. I ended up backing Youssef Zalal in his return fight. And even as a guy betting Zalal, he way outperformed my expectations. Something changed in Zalal after he got cut by the UFC. This is a kid who used his speed, his athleticism, control grappling, footwork. He would out point strike people. He would try to just get his way to the judges, dropped a fight to Sungwoo Choi, which has aged extremely poorly. Choi hasn't been doing all that great in the UFC recently. A split decision to Sean Woodson, which frankly, if you go back, I kind of feel like actually he probably deserved the nod in that fight. But he was starting to turn over a leaf against Damon Blackshear. He gave away the first 2 rounds in that fight, and then he turned it up in round 3, got himself a 10-8 for a draw. Wasn't enough to keep his job, but it was kind of that, I think, mentality shift for him. Instead of being so passive, he started to go more offensive. And if you guys think back to his debut, this man, or not his debut, sorry, I think it was Ilia Toporia's debut. He was a minus 160 favorite over Ilia, who now has gold wrapped around his waist in the UFC. Like, that's kind of what they thought of this kid just a couple of years ago. Now he is far more offensive. He comes forward instead of running away. He mixes in his grappling extremely well. His knees and his elbows, I noticed, are exceptionally dangerous these days. I love Youssef Zalal's game. I've been a fan of him since before he left the UFC in the first place. This is a spot where, frankly, I don't see a single area where his opponent is better. Jarno Errens, 29 years old. He's on a 1-2 UFC run. He just kind of saved his gig with a win over Steve Wynn on his last fight. I talked about Wynn, Aaron. He's one of the few 2 or 3-time Dana White Contender Series competitors. I don't think those guys are cut out for the UFC. Unless you're a spectacular talent, somebody who is going to the Contender a second time for experience, for hype, a Bo Nickel, something like that. If you legitimately need a second or a third try on Dana White's Contender Series before they get you a contract, my suspicion, I'm tracking this, I'm keeping tabs on this, those guys just don't do well long-term in the UFC. So I was not ready to bet on Steve Wynn, even though I'm looking to fade Jarno Errens at every opportunity. And sure enough, Errens gets the dang thing done, but it was not without a couple of sketchy moments. It was back and forth. He got busted up. He was bloody in that fight. Errens will have a 1-inch reach advantage. He's only got a 28% takedown defense so far in the UFC, which quite frankly is abysmal, especially when facing a guy like a Youssef Zalal who definitely can go to the grappling if you want to. I just think Zalal can win this fight any way he wants to, Aaron. He is a better striker. If he wants to use his speed and athleticism and go back to his point striking style, I think Errens is going to have a real hard time finding him in there. If he wants to wrestle, he's going to have no problem taking this guy down. Once they get on the ground, Zalal is the far better jiu-jitsu player. I can't find a single spot where Errens is better. And even if you want to go on, he's just tough, man. He's tough. Zalal's tough too. This is not a guy that's fragile. This is not a guy that can't trade and take a punch. He absolutely has been chin checked, and he's walked away from those situations just fine. I love Youssef Zalal this week. I've actually made him my my anchor on a lot of different parlays this week, Aaron. That's something new that I'm kind of mixing into my MMA game. Every once in a while, there's someone who you're just absolutely convinced is going to win their fight, regardless of price. You don't need to get involved in a prop. And I just parlay them up with everybody else I feel like is going to win. I kind of use them as a free square to bring the price tag down on other people that I would like a better number on. And that's what I call the anchor. And that's what I've done here with Youssef Zalal. So I've got him in like 4 or 5 different parlays this week because as long as he wins, I think those other bets are probably going to come through as well and at a much, much nicer price tag. I'm 3-0 so far when I've done this. The fighter that I picked as the anchor has in fact come through. Zalal is anchor number 4, baby. I like him to win. I like him probably to win by decision, although I could see him getting a finish in this fight as well. What do you make of this one?
Yeah, Zalal looks like he certainly found the secret sauce. I mean, he looked great against Billy Quarantillo, and that was on short notice. I think that, he wins this fight, like you said, kind of however he wants to win this fight. But there's one prop on the board that's fairly interesting, which is the Zalal KO prop at plus 900. Now, I know that we have not seen Errens get knocked out in a fight. I think that he's been submitted just once. And he does have the reputation for being super tough. But I mean, I think Zalal's got underrated hands. I think that if it does get to the ground, Zalal could finish it on the ground using strikes. I don't think that's, I always say when you see big favorites like this, and usually it's more favorites in the 6-7 to 1 area code that I think I like to utilize the strategy more with. I did this once with Sadiq Youssef when he won by submission. I always say, try to you go the path of, the prop where you're getting the most bang for your buck, where you're getting like a 9-1 on a Zalal KO TKO, because sometimes when you're that big of a favorite, you can just kind of have your way with an opponent. You're that much better than them, and you want to show off all the different wrinkles of your game. That's always been a strategy that I've looked at when you're looking at how to play these interesting props, and I think that's certainly a way to approach it. But I think, like you said, I mean, Zalal can win by sub, he can win by decision. Errens is very tough, like you mentioned, so. As an anchor, I think that is a very smart move, and I think that's probably the safest play on this entire card is Zalal moneyline.
I am so happy you agree with me on that. That absolutely warms my heart because, it's sometimes a little bit terrifying. I got to be honest with you. The last anchor that I made was Nate Maness, and I expected that to be a round 1 smoking. Right? I thought I was gonna have that one done and over with in the bag, easy peasy. But he decided to take a risk-adverse path in that fight, and that's why the anchor is a money line play, because if I were to get hosed, playing inside the distance or something like that, we ain't playing around. You just go money line just in case. And it will ruin my night. If Zalal goes down for whatever reason, there goes all my other bets. So it's a risky venture, and it's something that I'm being very, very careful with picking my spots on. But that's why we're going Zalal this week, because I do think he's the safest play on the board, and I think he just checks every single box. He's better than this guy everywhere, and short of something fluky happening, I think he gets his hand raised.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I just think I don't see an area where Errens is better, and I also haven't seen a lot of improvement from Errens. I know he won that last fight, but like you said, Stephen Wynn had to really claw his way to get into the UFC. He was good on the regional scene, of course, like somebody who belongs in the UFC. But when you see guys like that, there are other examples like a Jamie Pickett, for example, or guys that are kind of end up being lambs to the slaughter when they get to the big promotions. And I don't know necessarily if that's going to be the fate of Stephen Wynn. I still think that he's got a lot of talent that comes from a great camp. But, Austin Lane's another example, a guy who fought somebody who's coming up in his next fight most recently, a guy that's been on Contender Series more than once. I think that you're onto something when it comes to looking at that trend, with the exception of those kind of outliers that you mentioned, like a Bo Nickel.
Yeah, you've got to put them in their own category. They don't count. they come along few and far between. But hey, we got another fight coming up here, Aaron. This one's Karl Williams and Jhonata Diniz. I forgot how to say that guy's first name. Do you remember how to pronounce his first name?
I believe it's Jhonata.
Jhonata. Okay, thank you. I'm very, very happy to have you here for that, because pronunciation is not my strong suit. I've always called him Diniz, and even when you're like looking at things and you're taking notes and you're watching tape, and I forgot to pronounce the guy's first name in my head. Like in my brain, he only has one name. He is simply Diniz.
Yeah,
Aaron,
I've just got to say, Jhonata going to take this guy in this fight. I mean, the Karl Williams train has just been a tough one to stop.
Oh, I love it. Jhonata gonna take this guy. Killing me, Aaron. Oh, okay. So
That's what I'm here
got
for.
a
I'm here
bit
for
of
comic. You're here for the analysis. I'm just here for the comic relief.
No, that's fantastic. I love it. The 1-2 punch. So you've got an opinion on this one, apparently, man. Why don't you go ahead and take this one? Tell me a little bit about Karl Williams and Diniz here. What do you like about this fight?
I mean, since Karl Williams has gotten into the UFC, it's been death, taxes, and Williams by decision. I mean, like,
Yeah.
it's one of the safest bets that we've seen in terms of MMA since he's entered into the UFC. Lawson took him down, controlled him, no problem. Lucas Brzeski took him down, controlled him, no problem. I mean, basically, this guy has like the same relentlessness as Jailton Almeida, just without any sort of finishing instincts whatsoever. Like, he's more than happy to take people down and control them. In the Justin Tafa fight, I was a little bit nervous because we know that Tafa's got that power, but as soon as Tafa would land, take down, control, rinse, repeat. And I expect this to be more of the same because I actually think that this guy is probably more green than the three guys that Karl Williams has already beaten in the UFC. Like, Diniz has not fought very high-level competition at all. Basically has fought like sub-contender series level competition as a heavyweight. His last win is against Austin Lane, who we just kind of discussed being one of these multi-time contender series guys. Great athlete, former NFL player, but in terms of his talent inside the cage, we haven't seen too much of that in the UFC. So I think the Karl Williams decision at plus 130 is like, as safe of a play, and another guy that you can probably fairly comfortably anchor when you're deciding which are the safer picks on this card.
Okay. All right. I don't hate it, and I get the idea. I get the angle. Of all the parlays that I made this week, Aaron, I did not include Karl Williams. And that's just because Diniz kind of scares the crap out of me. I mentioned at the top of the show, my max bets. I'm 9-3. Two of those were to the same guy that I lost on. Alex Pereira. He busted two of my max bets because I didn't believe in him. And he similarly was a vicious, violent striking kickboxer that came over to the UFC. And my struggle with him, Aaron, was that I didn't think he would adjust to the full MMA game timely enough to beat some of these guys that are much, much better championship caliber fighters. When he got up to the top, I just didn't see him holding the belt very long against more well-rounded fighters. I was wrong. I was very, very wrong. And I've paid it with human dollars, and it's been a real sore spot in my life, especially my record for 2024. But Diniz gives me shades of that. And not obviously, he's nowhere near the same caliber kickboxer as a guy like Pereira is, but he is 7-0. He is undefeated. He's got hands. He's got power. And he just touches people and they die. Like, they just fall over, completely donezo. It's gone. That's the kind of guy that I've gotten in front of a couple of times recently, and it's burned me. I don't want to do that again. Now, I agree with you. Karl Williams, death, taxes, and Williams by decision, because his pace is just relentless. Absolutely relentless. 4.75 takedowns per 15 minutes. He does hit at a 50% accuracy. He landed 7 on Tafa, 8 on Brzeski. I mean, the guy just doesn't stop. The struggle here for me is the fact that he's hitting that many takedowns. Aaron, he can't hold anybody down. He knows how to get them to the mat, but he can't keep them there. So if this Diniz guy figures out how to suck his hips back just a little bit, maybe works a little bit of a get up game, he's going to have shots here. And we've seen Karl get cracked. The Tafa fight, he was on skates more than once in that fight. And every round starts back up on the feet. It's another risk. It's another opportunity for you to get clipped. I'm not sure in the days of the UFC cutting guys like Muhammad Mokaev, they're looking to really get Karl Williams a following. This guy Diniz that's knocking people out with fast right hands, on the other hand, I could see them trying to put him in a situation where he could showcase a little bit. So I'm a little bit nervous about this spot. I just want to kind of caution everybody. I wouldn't make Williams my lock of the week. I don't want to be involved in this fight at this price tag. For me, it would be a dog or pass situation where I would roll the dice on the up-and-comer who's got the big-time power. But I see the threat of him just ending up on his back for 15 straight minutes.
Yeah, dude, don't make people sweat this one. Like, there are better underdogs in this card. Listen, I mean, I like the Pereira. That's all great, and Pereira's a beast, but he's also not a heavyweight, and he's not facing a guy that is just grapple, 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 grapple. You know, he hasn't faced a single fighter like that since he's come to the UFC. They're putting Diniz in there against this guy who all he does is grapple at heavyweight. That's just such a recipe for success for a guy like Karl Williams, because I just don't see how Diniz is going to stuff any sort of takedown attempts from Karl Williams, and that's what Karl Williams is going to do, is just takedown, rinse, repeat. And the reason why, like you mentioned, he's got all those takedowns is because as soon as anybody gets up, he's basically still connected them and takes them down over and over again. Like, he's just continuously dropping these guys down. I don't know. I think that Karl Williams is a relatively safe pick, but I guess we'll find out in a matter of days. But yeah, I think that at heavyweight, when you got a fighter like this against somebody who is probably not spending a lot of time in the gym grappling, a guy that at heavyweight where you can rely on that kind of thing, that nuclear weapon, the elite striking against almost everybody else in the division, you don't focus that much time on grappling. Now, of course, he will have for this camp, but is that going to be enough? I guess we'll find out.
Is it enough? That's the question. And I'm right there with you. This is a very volatile fight, like you mentioned before. And I don't really want to get involved in that kind of volatility. It's heavyweights. It could go either way. And frankly, I'm a little bit worried about the over, because with this guy not having much grappling experience, we could see Williams' first finish in the UFC. If he wears this guy out and he's got nothing left to give in the 5th round, we know Williams has got a motor. He's probably a 25-minute fighter, not a 15-minute fighter. So I think if he pours it on, Diniz could crumble under the pressure, and we could see a TKO or a sub from Williams against this kind of a fighter if he has no get-up game, if he didn't drill those takedowns. So again, danger. You know, I don't, even if I'm saying I don't want to lay the chalk on the Williams side of things, I don't even think Williams' decision is safe. He could get a finish here in rounds 2 or 3.
Yeah, that's very possible. But at the same time, like, I keep looking at, like, maybe he's going to get a submission this time. He doesn't even attempt them. Like, I think I had Williams by submission in the last one as one of my darts. He's like not even trying for subs. He's just looking to control, land strikes from top. Then as soon as somebody scrambles, takes them down again. Like, it's very, like, you know, it's a great strategy for heavyweight if you can do it. And I think that's just what he's been doing without that problem.
I hear you. To be fair, Tafa has no neck, though. It's hard to tap
that
out
is
a guy
true.
That doesn't have a neck.
That was one thing that I was worried about, was that he just has no neck. I was thinking maybe arm triangle, but even still, Tafa, I mean, that's a compact human being with different bones than other people. Yes.
So some of those guys with shoulders like that, they just, even the arm triangle, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, guys. Next fight up, we've got some women's MMA action. Karol Rosa, she takes on Pannie Kianzad in a fight that I am actually very excited about. You guys know me. These fights are the ones that I get worked up for. I find my way to an angle here. Pannie Kianzad, 16-8. She's 3-3 in her last 6. Actually, both women coming into this fight are 3-3 in their last 6. Kianzad is 32 years old. She's got good, solid boxing. We've gone to war with her a couple of different times because of that. Very heavy on her feet, likes to plod her way forward, get in there and trade. She hits decently hard. She's pretty tough. I like her hands. There's some things that I really do enjoy about Pannie Kianzad. The only problem for me is that, Aaron, I think she's tapped out. I think we've seen the final version of her. I don't believe she's getting any better. She hasn't been for a couple of years. And if this is the final product of her, she really struggles against anybody that can mix up the game. You know, 66% takedown defense if you look at her stats, but it feels a whole heck of a lot worse than that. In her last couple fights when she got taken down, yeah, the numbers say 60%, and that's okay. It's not great, but it's okay. But she goes down so quickly, so easily. It just, there's no return effort. There's no resistance. And this on her back, she really doesn't have much to give from there. She also is not great defensively when it comes to leg kicks. You know, if you're going to stand and box with her, she'll bang it out all day. But when you mix that game up and you start throwing those kicks in there, she can get debilitated. She can get hurt by that. And I think that sets up very nicely for Karol Rosa. Rosa is 17-6. Also, like I mentioned, 3-3 in her last 6 fights, but she's 29 years old. She's just coming into her prime. And I look back at that Aldana fight. Aaron, I don't know if you reran that one yet. It was a banger. That fight was
an amazing fight. I remember that one. That was the fight of the night.
Yeah.
And that was one of the better women's fights. Yeah, that was one of the better fights, women's fights that we saw last year. And it closed out, I think it was the last card of the year. It closed it out. It was a great fight.
It was great, and I didn't remember it being as entertaining as it was. You go back and you watch that fight. I mean, Rosa outlanded Aldana 204 significant strikes to 145, and somehow still managed to lose that fight. But you know why that happened? Because she was focused on the leg kicks. Aldana busted her face up. She came forward. We all know how hard Aldana hits. And that's the problem. I really feel like the damage, the optics, that's what got the fight done for her. But to my point earlier, that's going to play right into this fight with Pannie Kianzad. If she fights that exact same fight, no change, no evolution, she hasn't done a dang thing in her fight game since that fight, and she's the exact same person she was on the night she fought Aldana, she's going to destroy Kianzad because that consistent leg attack is going to wreck the forward pressure of Pannie Kianzad. Now, Rosa actually has a ground game. We don't see it very often. She's one of those fighters who, when she decides to take it to the mat, she's actually very talented. She just doesn't choose to do that very often. 1.22 takedowns per 15 minutes. She does hit at a 45% accuracy. So when she does go, she tends to get it. But she will put a full MMA game together. And it seems to me like she's just kind of topping out against some of these contender type fighters, the upper echelon of the division. But again, she's younger. She's got time to grow and develop. She's working very closely with her partner, Diniz Gomes, who I am a huge fan of, who is a vicious striker, who is a very mean, come forward power puncher. And I believe she may have just switched gyms. So a bit of a change up in the personal life. And that's not a bad thing for a fighter at this stage of her career, at this age. I think she's going to put it together. I think this is where we finally see Karol Rosa really kind of find herself and put a full performance together, getting a step down in competition against somebody who may have topped out in the UFC. Rosa's one of my legs, Aaron. I have got her tied to Youssef Zalal in a 2-leg parlay, getting just shy of even money. Got to lay a little bit of chalk, but I really think Rosa wins this fight 9 times out of 10. And I know that's kind of a bold statement. She goes to a lot of split decisions. She makes fights a little closer than they should be, but I almost feel like this is a hand-picked opponent.
I've got to say, aside from our Karl Williams and Diniz dialogue towards the end there, I think that people are going to think we're just agreeing on everything here today because I'm 100% with you on this. Matchups are everything in MMA. This is like a perfect matchup for Karol Rosa because you've got somebody who likes to throw a lot of volume, who doesn't mix up takedowns or anything like that. Not that that's a problem for Rosa, but it's going to be a fight that's contested on the feet. Rosa's going to be the faster fighter. Rosa's going to be able to land more volume than Pannie Kianzad. Pannie Kianzad also gets, if you watch her fights, she always has facial lacerations and her nose always gets busted up. And Karol Rosa has such a devastating jab and such an array of weapons that are basically almost all head strikes, with the exception of, like you said, the leg kicks. And somebody who's as flat-footed as Pannie Kianzad is going to get eaten alive in that department too. This is going to feel like somebody who's battling a wasp's nest, in my opinion. I just think that Karol Rosa is going to piece her up wherever this fight, in whatever range this fight takes place. I think she's going to be the faster fighter. And, the only thing is, with fights like this, my only concern is if it goes to the judges and the volume is somewhat equal, in a lot of these fights in the women's weight divisions that are, 135 pounds and down, sometimes it's hard for the judges to decipher what is doing more damage. And that can always be a big issue. But the thing about it in this situation is Rosa doesn't usually show a lot of damage on her face, whereas Kianzad does. So even if that is a question, if the judges look at Kianzad's face afterwards, if this fight goes the way that I think it's going to go, I think that Rosa is going to be the side. I think I'm with you. I actually think that this is probably a good price for Karol Rosa just because of the matchup. And I think that Pannie Kianzad is a very good fighter who can beat a lot of fighters in this division. I'm not trying to take anything away from her. And I think that she's had a really good UFC career. It's just, when you have a matchup like this and you're Rosa, this is just such a matchup that favors her in almost every area, whether it's on the ground, which I don't think it will get to. And if it does, she'll have the advantage there. And then on the feet, I think she's going to have a pretty good advantage too with her speed, with her volume, and just in terms of the stylistic approach that these women both have to striking. So I'm going to go with Rosa and join the party with you.
All right. Welcome to the party. The water is fine over here in the pool. Let's go, Aaron. Glad you are joining me. And my guy Pepe Silva chiming in that he's big on Rosa. You love to hear that. You absolutely love to hear that. Aaron, I don't know if you know Pepe. He's one of the sharpest guys on MMA Twitter. Very, very solid sports bettor. And one of the members over at Fight Numbers, which we will talk about when we get to the sponsor section of the show. But always respect his opinion whenever he comes in and drops a dime like that. I'm very, very happy to be on the same side as him. So glad we're on the same page here. I may be looking at the round 2, round 3 KO props, Aaron, because like you talked about, like we both talked about, I think she's better everywhere. I think she's going to keep it on the feet. She's going to chip away. And I think we could see like a standing leg kick TKO in this kind of a spot. So referee mercy stoppage in round 3, that probably should pay pretty handsomely. We only have offshore books with any kind of props or anything like that at this point in time. And the numbers tend to be a little bit better when they get stateside even. Rosa by round 3 KO TKO is 33-1. Round 2 is 25-1. They are not expecting that coming. And I'm sure when DraftKings and FanDuel get their hands on those price tags, they'll probably be a little bit higher. You might even get like a 35 or a 40-1 in round 3. So definitely will be having a taste of that.
Yeah, that's a sprinkle situation for sure. Because you could also get a referee stop, like a doctor stoppage, right? Like
exactly.
If Kianzad is as busted up as she has been in the past in one of these fights, and you've got Rosa landing close to 200 significant strikes, I mean, you just never know. It's not that she's necessarily going to get put out, but sometimes the doctor will step in if like her nose is busted up or something along those lines, or she has a big laceration.
Yep. And doctors cut stoppages count as TKOs.
Yeah, so exactly.
That's the way. That's absolutely the way to go. All right, everybody. We've got over 700 live viewers right here on the pod. Thank you for being with us. Hit the like button if you will, and let's keep on rolling. Next up, we have got left hand to God, Danny Barlow himself. And this is one we talked about at the top of the show, Aaron. We do have a short notice replacement here. Veretennikov is coming in here on roughly a week's notice, and he's taking this opportunity. Tough spot for this guy. He is 12-4. And he's 34 years old. This will be his UFC debut. He was discovered on Dana White's looking for a fight. Impressively enough, he actually got a win over Anthony Ivy that night. Now, Ivy,
he's on a roll right now.
I was just going to say, some of you may recall. I'm kicking myself, Aaron. I was planning on betting Anthony Ivy in the PFL this past week. And I just didn't have enough time to really like sink my teeth into the research that I like to do before I start throwing my money around and, telling people what I'm officially picking and stuff like that. I don't want to do it willy-nilly. So I was like, you know what? I didn't have the time. I don't feel 1,000% comfortable. I'm just going to kind of sit back and not do that. Really kicking myself because he came through as a solid underdog, looked fantastic. So that win has aged very well here for Nikolay. And Nikolay lost on Dana White's Contender Series to Michael Morales. Morales is already cracking into the contender circle. He looks fantastic. Everybody is loving them. So Michael Morales in this day and age. So again, tough run for this guy, but he's fought really tough competition. And even the ones that he's lost to, he's fought well against. He got back on the regionals. He got 3 finishes after he didn't get the UFC call from that Dana White's Contender Series loss. He looks like he's very well rounded. He can grapple. He's got power. He's a little too old to be considered a prospect at this point. But frankly, based on what he's doing and what the opponents he's beat have been doing, he probably deserves a roster spot in the UFC. Now, Barlow, that's a tall order coming in here. 8-0, undefeated, 1-0 off Dana White's Contender Series. This guy's left hand is unreal. The name left hand to God is, perfect for him. He knows that's his moneymaker, and he sets up his game to make sure he can make that thing count when it lands. And he's got crazy power. That left hand is an absolute hammer. He was really, really measured, actually, in his last fight against Josh Quinlan. And that was impressive to me. The fact that he was focused on footwork and defensive striking, the fact that he didn't overextend himself, and he wasn't just spamming the left hand. He fought a really solid, full MMA fight in that fight against Josh Quinlan. It shows the evolution of a guy like Danny Barlow. He still does leave his hands a little bit low. He got chin checked a couple times by Josh Quinlan. Frankly, you want him to patch up those defensive holes, but it made me feel better that he could take a punch too. Some of these guys are glass cannons. They can land one, but they can't take the return fire. He's got a chin, Danny Barlow's chin checks out in this spot. He does a couple of weird things. Sometimes he gets a little confused and they're almost Trevor Peak style where like weird back fist type stuff that he just doesn't know what to do in like the open space. So he kind of flicks something out there to hit his opponent with whatever he possibly can find. He does try to time some flying knees and stuff like that. Barlow will have a 5-inch reach advantage in this spot. And I did go ahead and make him a parlay piece, one of my anchored parlays here. I'll be honest with you, Aaron. I'm nervous about this one. I think minus 350 is way too wide. I think this fight is going to play out far more closely than this number would suggest. But at the end of the day, I do feel like Danny's going to get his hand raised. The parlay came out to like minus 159. So it's the smallest bet that I made of my 2-leg parlays there with my anchor of Youssef Zalal. Again, smallest bet of those because I'm a little nervous. I don't want to disrespect Nikolay. I think he's very talented. I think the skill set is solid. He could expose a hole that we haven't seen in Danny Barlow just yet. We'll find out. I do think Danny's going to win, so I'll have a small investment here on him, but I'm not going crazy at minus 350. What do you make of this fight?
Yeah, I think that Nikolay is somebody who would be worth a stab on, to be honest. I just think the price is way too wide. I know it's short notice, but this is a guy who trains at King's MMA. He's done really well the last 10 years. Just under 10 years, he's lost one time. He lost to Miles Morales. He's only, do I have the right name? Michael Morales. Sorry, there's Miles Morales is like the Spider-Man movie. So I always get that confused with either way. He lost to Morales on the Contender Series. Morales is the top prospect right now, undefeated. But Nikolay, I think, like, you look at the level of competition he's fought, they're all really good, high-level fighters for the most part, even the ones that he's fought since his stint on Contender Series. So I think that it's worth a stab, because I think the price is a little bit too wide here for, again, a guy who trains at a good camp, has been only lost one fight really in just under 10 years against the top guy. Like, I think that you could do worse than taking him on short notice against Barlow, because I think Barlow still has a little bit of room for improvement, to be honest. I think that if Veretennikov mixes things up a little bit, he could flummox Barlow. Veretennikov trains at the better camp, and I think that Barlow is somebody who's still training, I believe, regionally in Tennessee. So again, like, would I be confident in putting like a whole lot on Nikolay? Probably not. But it might just be worth a stab in what I think is just a pretty clear dog or pass, because we need to see what this guy's about, what he looks like against a guy that's clearly not as good as Morales and Danny Barlow. Like, I think if you put Danny Barlow against Morales would be a 3-1, maybe 4-1 favorite, because he just has the more refined skills at this point in time. But I think that I would be a little bit fearful of putting anything on Barlow. Like, if you take the Barlow KO prop at about even money, like, I get it, because Barlow's got that big weapon, and that's how he wins most of his fights. Get the price down a little bit, because I think that's probably his best path to victory, most likely path to victory. Yep. But I think you could do worse than getting a dog with this kind of quality level of competition and quality resume on short notice against a guy that I still think has some work to do in terms of becoming established and showing that he's a well-rounded mixed martial artist. Because a fight against Josh Quinlan, like, we knew what that fight was going to be, right? It's going to be two guys slinging, and may the better man win. I don't think that's going to be the case with this fight.
I'll agree with you here, Aaron. I really will. This one has been kind of souring on me. I made my parlays up and I thought, you know what? I don't need to go big on this one. I'll make it the small one. I'll make it the small leg. I don't feel super confident about it, but I do think Danny wins. And then I've just been kind of sitting here and kind of going, you know what? If I lose one of these 4 or 5 parlays, I wouldn't be shocked if that's the one. Everyone's riding super high on Danny Barlow. He just is so green still at this point. And even though Nikolay is 34 years old, he's a well-rounded MMA type of guy. And those are the guys that'll expose you. When you're not quite at the right level yet, those are the guys that'll find the chink in the armor. And, he got busted up by Michael Morales in that first fight, and he never quit on himself. He was down and out, and he was hurt, and he was chaining takedowns. He was doing everything he could to mix that fight up to get it back in a realm where he could maybe have some semblance of control. And he went the full 15 minutes with Michael Morales, even hurt, even damaged. And that's the kind of thing that I'm not sure Danny Barlow can handle. Do we know that Danny, when he throws a flying knee, if he gets taken down and put on his back, do we know that he has a get-up game and he'll be able to continue that kind of a pace if it happens more than once? I don't know that. And when I've got those kinds of questions, I'm happy I made that the small leg. And frankly, guys, you might see me flip and put a like a 1-unit play on the dog here, because the underdog is a big, juicy, fat underdog. He is plus 275, it looks like at this point. And if I've got, minus 159 or whatever, again, assuming Youssef Zalal does his job, I'll win 1 unit if Danny Barlow wins. I might put that unit on Nikolay and try and flip this thing on its head and be free rolling on this one if the dog pulls the upset. We'll see if I chicken out or not, but I could see Nikolay upsetting the apple cart this week. He might bust a couple parlays.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. I mean, because it's hard to really know what we're getting with this guy on short notice as well. But I think this price is going to continue to go up. I think Barlow will see close probably around 4-1. And if that's the case, I think that it's almost worth just kind of a blind dart on Veretennikov and see how it goes.
You know what? Dixon Sider with an interesting point from the chat here. He said
that's a clever name.
Yeah, it's a good one. He's a regular around these parts. Barlow coming off of a hand surgery from a broken hand like Gadziev, he breaks his hands again in round 1. It's going to be ugly. Might go to decision. That is not a bad call right there, my guy. Dixon, that is not a bad call. Might be over.
It wouldn't surprise me at all. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Nope, wouldn't shock me one bit in this kind of a fight. All right, guys, real quick, want to shout out the sponsors here for the show. We have got, obviously, the home of Fight. You guys, if you haven't jumped in the Telegram, you absolutely should. There's a link in the description below. Any breaking fight news and stuff like that, it's going to be right here for you immediately. You can talk with other fight fans. And if you want to have your day ruined like me when you get a blast that Sean O'Malley says he's got options after the Merab fight and he might not even fight Umar Nurmagomedov, get out of here with that kind of stuff. I don't want to read that news. Thank you very much. Join the Telegram. Get blasted with this kind of stuff. Join us and come hang out. And of course, join the Discord as well. Come hang out with a bunch of fight fans and talk fights and stuff like that over there with us as well.
Well, we all know he's going to be facing Gervonta Davis after that fight, right? Like that's the fight to make.
That's the obvious answer. Is
Gervonta
Davis. Oh my God, Merab, please save us all. End him. Spectation Sports, you guys. If you're researching for, Dana White's Contender Series, which is right around the corner, a lot of people are going to be doing research. A lot of those fighters come from promotions that are subscribed to Spectation Sports. 20% off your subscription there. If you use promo code DieHard, will get you in the door. All the MMA action you could want. Every single weekend, they've got shows going from all around the world. A lot of them have betting odds. It's going to help you with your research. It's a wonderful resource for you guys. Make sure you check out Spectation Sports. I talked briefly about fight numbers and John Kelly's boys over there. My guy Pepe in the chat. They operate fight numbers. It's a wonderful place to get a lot of information. They do a lot of things as far as tools and optimizers for your DraftKings. If you want to do daily fantasy for MMA, this is the place to be. Their odds page here on the site, that's absolutely free for everybody, and it's amazing. It's the best one in the game. You can see every number at the optimal price tag, every major book. A lot of these other sites that do this, they're missing a lot of the books. These guys have all the books, so you can see everything you need right here. And then on top of that, if you do end up subscribing to their service, they do shows, they have picks, professional sports gamblers. It's a great place, guys. It's a great resource. Make sure you check them out. Again, link in the description below. Yeah, I would appreciate it if you used that. And finally, Bet Openly. I've been telling you guys about Bet Openly for a long time now. 1% juice. It's saving gamblers money using it. It's peer-to-peer. So instead of funding a sports book or something like that with your degeneracy, it's actually another human being on the other end of the bet taking your action. It makes me sleep better at night knowing that I'm not donating and I'm giving the money to somebody else who's a lot like me out there instead. On top of that, you're getting better prices on absolutely everything. So let me give you a bit of an example. If you're looking at the tags here for the fights, Jarno Errens, Youssef Zalal, the numbers are equal, plus 342 and minus 342. That's because it's 1% juice and only the winner pays it. Every single thing you bet is going to have a better number than any other sports book when you use Bet Openly. And on top of that, guys, I got to tell you, there's been some shenanigans going on lately. I don't know if you saw this, Aaron, but apparently DraftKings is going to start charging the winners when they actually win bets. They're saying that they don't have enough market share and the taxes are too high and they're not profitable enough. And so they're actually tacking on like a surcharge when you win your bet. So looking at DraftKings numbers, for example, the Youssef Zalal fight, Youssef is a minus 410 favorite. Jarno Errens is plus 320. There's $1 difference between those two numbers. It's not even close to equal. And then let's say you do win your bet. They're now going to charge you for the pleasure of having won. Guys, it's hard enough to be a profitable sports bettor in this game if you take it seriously. The juice makes it hard for you to actually win money. And then if you do start winning money, these bookies cut you off and they never even think twice about you ever again. So now, even if you're a casual, they're taking more of your money when you do win. None of that shit's happening at Bet Openly. You're getting better numbers, better prices, far less juice. You're playing with real people. And because it's peer-to-peer, there's no such thing as limits. These guys have loaded up 5, 10K plus bets every single weekend. You'll see them, especially during football season. Now that it's coming up, you're not going to get limited at Bet Openly because it's all about other human beings taking your action. So check it out, guys. Hit the button, sign up. And you know what? I see you in there. There will be blood. Even if you're in Ontario, though, you're still going to get better numbers if you use Bet Openly. So I get you guys don't have to pay taxes, but at the end of the day, this will still save you money long-term using this betting platform. So just give it a shot. Check it out. Hit the link in the description below. Guys, this is UFC Vegas 95. I am joined by the legend himself, Aaron Bronstetter, to break this card down. Make sure you're showing him some love and support. He's given us his time here this evening, and it's an absolute honor to be sharing the screen with you here, Aaron. So thank you for joining me on the show. We've got a couple more fights to go ahead and talk about here. The next one up, Champus Grigoriou, Charalampos. I said it wrong by accident, everybody. I had Uncle Weezy teach me how to pronounce that correctly the last time I broke down his fight and then totally forgot to use it. Charalampos Grigoriou. And he is taking on Toshiomi Kazama. I am super intrigued by this fight, Aaron. I am really, really interested in this fight. Kazama is a guy that I have not been excited about, besides maybe the freak show upside of this kind of a fighter, where he's just a life or death round one grappler type. He's going to come out and throw heavy hands. He's going to blitz. He's going to attack, and he's going to kill you, or he's going to go out on his shield. That's what this guy does. That's what he's all about. And so far, that has not worked out well in the UFC. He's 0-2, both those by first round KO. And now he's taking on Grigoriou, who is 8-4, 32 years old. This guy, off Dana White's Contender Series, lost to Chad Henlinger, a victim of the Dana White's Contender Series fade. I absolutely love when I can say that. Chad Henlinger is one of these guys that just refuses to go away. Grigoriou couldn't keep the pace. He's a big, muscly, strong, powerful dude. He gets wild and reckless the way he comes forward. He rips big, huge, powerful hooks. He throws his stuff from the hip, and he's trying to kill you with every single punch. He's a big, strong wrestler. He can take you down. He can get on top of you, but he's got a suspect gas tank. Every time this guy is in a fight where his opponent doesn't just go away, he breaks. His last loss was my boy C-Rod. Christian Rodriguez absolutely cooked this guy, got him out of there in round 3. Chad Henlinger, not quite that offensive, so he ended up grinding his way to a decision, but kind of the same thing happened. You get out of round 1 with this guy, and he is not nearly as dangerous anymore. Call me crazy, Aaron. I think that this is where we finally get to see Kazama show his colors a little bit. This is a massive step down in competition. Kazama has fought Garrett Armfield, who, by the way, was a massive surprise. I drastically underrated how good Garrett Armfield is when he came to the UFC. And then Rinyat Nakamura, who is by far and away the best fighter to come out of that road to UFC series. That guy's an absolute stud, a complete monster. Yes, Grigoriou has power. Yes, Grigoriou can wrestle. So he seems like he's very much in the vein of those last two guys, but he is nowhere near the same level as those guys. He is not as smooth on the feet. His hands are not nearly as developed. He hits hard, but he's not as slick. I really feel like Kazama can get this fight grappling where he hasn't been able to against his last two opponents. And if the fight is standing, he's not going to be at quite the disadvantage as he was in his last couple fights, where his opponents were very smooth operators on the feet. He's got his back up against the wall. If he's going to stay in the UFC, if he's going to keep his job, this is the fight that he's got to win. And on top of that, I just can't stomach the thought of Grigoriou as a minus 200 favorite to almost anybody. I think this is dog or pass. I'm going to watch this fight, this line very, very closely. And Aaron, don't be shocked if you see me on Kazama by the end of the week, because frankly, I think this is a fight that he can win. He's a BJJ brown belt with absolutely filthy grappling skills. So if this fight turns into a scramble, that's going to burn the gas tank of Grigoriou, and that's going to provide opportunities for Kazama to win where he's best. I like the dog here. What are you doing in this fight? What do you make of this one?
Yeah, see, the problem with what you're saying is, like, I think that if Kazama wants to have that kind of a game plan, he's going to be a little bit reckless. Like, he's going to have to be a little bit reckless because I think that Grigoriou is by far the better wrestler than he is. Like, if you look at the fight
Yes.
against Enheliger, Grigoriou was still able to take him down 4 times, and Enheliger's a really good wrestler, and Enheliger was 0 for 2 on takedowns. I think that Enheliger's a better wrestler than Kazama is, and I think that if Kazama is going to be going for takedowns, they're just going to get stuffed over and over again. So that would mean he needs some sort of greasy scramble to get into a situation, or maybe even pull guard where he can try to get Grigoriou with some sort of submission. But you look back at Grigoriou's resume, none of his losses are by submission. So, I mean, I think that you look at what he's able to do well, and I think that you look at the Cameron Smotherman fight, and I think Cameron Smotherman is one of the better prospects outside of the UFC right now. That kid's a stud. And Grigoriou was able to put him out in 1 minute. This guy's a precision striker. He's got good power. And I think all it takes is one with Kazama. We've seen Kazama get knocked out by the likes of Garrett Armfield and Rinya Nakamura. And both guys are very good fighters, but and I do kind of agree with you that Grigoriou is not on the level with those guys just yet. But I don't think he trains at a good camp. He's at Cerro Longo. He's probably getting a lot of really good looks on the mats all the time from guys that have really good submission skills. I think that Kazama is just in over his head once again here, and I'm going to have to go with Grigoriou. I think the Grigoriou KO prop is certainly live as well. It's about even money, and that's probably the way that I would look at it. But I understand what you're saying. I don't see a great path for Kazama here, and that's always the way where if I'm going to take an underdog, I have to find a good path, and I don't really see a great one here for Kazama, because even if he does do what you're saying he should do, I still think that's going to leave openings for Grigoriou with the striking that could really leave Kazama open for as long as the fight goes. Now, the thing about Grigoriou that I have seen is his output isn't that potent. I mean, you look at the fight against Enheliger, barely got any strikes off for the most part. I think it was like 8 per round if you add it up on average, which is not good. Like, that's not a very good number for a UFC fighter. In fact, if you look at his UFC stats page, it's like 2.13 strikes landed, significant strikes landed per minute, 5.56 absorbed. Now, that's only in whatever one UFC fight and one Dana White Contender Series fight, but not a very good ratio. So I think it's an interesting fight. I don't think that Grigoriou is on the level with those other guys, but I still think that he's a bad matchup for Kazama.
That's fair. That is absolutely fair. And it's dog or pass for me just because I can't trust him at this number. We'll see what ends up happening. It's just not that long ago. You look back on his record, some of the guys he's losing decision to, 8-6. It was his second UFC fight, but like he lost to an 0-3 guy. Like, I just don't know that he's all he's cracked up to be, and he's nowhere near the level of the last 2 guys that Kazama's fought. So if Kazama just takes a deep breath, slows down just a hair, this fight gets very interesting to me. So more than likely a pass, but like I said, don't be shocked. I might take a dog shot this week on this one. We'll see what happens.
I wouldn't blame you. On cards like this, the volatility, it doesn't hurt.
Yep. Gotta steer into those crazy situations sometimes. Real quick, a question or comment, I guess, here by Nichols. He's saying that the parlays are hard to get accepted, especially the more legs you add. Yes, and that's where it's actually pretty great. My guy Gino, that owns, operates, built Bet Openly, he's a big advocate of still using sports books, because if you want to do crazy shit, if you want to parlay props, touchdown scorers, all that kind of stuff, try to win $1 million off of $10 on any given Sunday, use the sports books for that shit. That's exactly where you go to get those crazy odds. And if you want to just hit them where it hurts in their pocket, that's where you go to do that, because no sane human is going to book that kind of a parlay on Bet Openly. But if you're looking for something close to even money, a small underdog, my guy Matty Betts, he booked a $5,000 ticket on Bilal Muhammad. People were laying minus 250 to take his money on Bilal because they thought it was free. So you can still bet even big underdogs, decent plus money spots, as long as you're going, semi against the narrative, or there's somebody out there who's willing to take that kind of action. But absolutely, if you're doing prop parlays and crazy stuff like that, then you do want to use a normal book for that. And that's totally okay. Those types of spots are available, and it makes sense to go to a bookie that'll accept that kind of a wager. All right, guys. Next fight, Alan Nascimento takes on Rafael Filo in this next spot. Brazil on Brazil action, big time grappling action here. This is going to be a fun fight, Aaron. This might actually be the second best fight on the card at this point. I think
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's a great
yeah,
fight.
the way this one's falling, the way this card is falling apart, this one's jumped up a couple of notches for me here, but I think it might be the second best fight at this stage of the game for me here. I love this spot. I will tell you guys, I did add Nascimento to my anchor parlays. He is tied up with Youssef Zalal. That's the side I'm picking here, mostly because I like it a whole heck of a lot better at an even money number. He's a 2-1 favorite. You throw him in the parlay, he's sitting right around pick'em. I like Alan Nascimento right around pick'em. I like Alan Nascimento to get his hand raised, but that's not to say that it's necessarily going to be easy. Rafael Filo, he's been a bit of a surprise for me, Aaron. 16-3, killer beat killed grappler. I was grateful enough to cash in against Ode Osborne in his last fight, but I thought that this man was going to need to avoid round one with Ode Osborne. I thought that he was going to need to kind of slow down and cook that gas tank of Ode Osborne. Nope. He got in there and made him look silly. He took Ode Osborne out like that. I mean, it was not even close. It was not competitive. And then on top of that, he nearly finished Muhammad Mokaev in their fight. It was that crazy spot where he had the knee fully extended, could have destroyed that man's leg. Somehow he gets out, reverses, takes the neck, and finishes Filo instead. One of the weirdest, craziest transitions, but this guy could be 3-0 in the UFC. Anybody else taps to that knee bar. It's absolutely wild. He does get a little reckless on the feet. He likes to come forward. He's willing to eat shots, and we've seen him get rocked and wobbled and hurt. He will bite down on the mouthpiece, though, and not give up on himself. He'll give him an opportunity to get back in the fight and win. But as a primarily jiu-jitsu guy, he's got a 55% takedown defense. 10 wins by sub, 2 losses by sub. So it's definitely going to be kind of a BJJ versus BJJ type of situation. And frankly, I just think Alan Nascimento is going to be a little bit bigger. I think he's going to be a little bit more physical. When it comes to these types of spots, I lean wrestling over jiu-jitsu because the guy on top, generally on the judges' scorecards, is the one getting credit for winning in those situations. I think Nascimento is going to find his way on top. I think he'll be able to kind of bully Filo on the ground, and that'll be his path to victory here in this spot. Nascimento is 32 years old, 2-1 UFC run. He's a shoot-the-box guy, so he's working with guys like Thomas Almeida, Charles Oliveira. It's an amazing gym to be housed at. Now, he's a little bit inconsistent. He hasn't fought a lot lately, and I find that interesting. I need to find an interview with him or something because I'm curious what's kind of kept him out of action. But he got Carlos Hernandez out of there with a quickness in his last fight. His ground game is absolutely nasty. Slapped a body triangle on him standing and then choked him out from that position. He's a very, very strong physical grappler. And like I said, I think that's going to be the difference. He does tend to fight a little bit close when the fights get extended or if he can't bully people on the ground. So that is kind of concerning. The split decision loss to Julian Paiva, the split decision loss to Tagir. So it's definitely possible that we end up with a low volume, closely contested fight. But again, at the end of the day, I do think Nascimento is going to be the stronger grappler and find his way on top. And I think that'll be the difference. If they're standing, I slightly edge the striking of Alan Nascimento as well. So small margins, but I think he wins. What are you doing here, Aaron?
Yeah, it's a fun one. It's Shoot the Box versus Novo União, two of the best gyms in Brazil. I think I'm with you on this, though. I think that Nascimento is just a little bit better in both of the areas that this fight will take place, whether it's on the ground, whether it's standing. I think that Nascimento is better with the volume. So if it is on the feet, I think that he's going to outland Filio. And then I think that if it gets into scrambles and things like that, I think that Nascimento's BJJ is probably the best in the flyweight division. Am I thinking of, unless I'm forgetting somebody, but it's got to be up there near the top of the, maybe, you look at a Tatsuro Taira or something along those lines. But I mean, it's in that kind of conversation where you're looking at who's the best submission grappler in the flyweight division. And he's certainly up there. So I would lean Nascimento here. At the same time, though, we're seeing a lot of progression from Rafael Filio, which would scare me a little bit on this one, because I think that it is a fairly close fight. And we're looking at Nascimento as a, minus 210, minus 225 favorite, right? So that's always something that you've got to proceed with caution on, knowing that it's going to be a close fight, which I think it will be. If it goes to the judges, who knows what happens in that sort of a fight, whether maybe Filio connects on one better shot during a round. That's enough to swing it in a close fight, right? So I kind of would just pass on it, to be honest, at the current price. That's the way that I would look at it. It's not a fight that I have a ton of confidence in either side to definitely get it done.
Okay, fair enough. It should be a close fight, and hey, usually that ends up being a dog or pass situation when it comes to betting. If you're getting a lot of value on one side like that, I'm gonna hold my nose. I'll go ahead and take the favorite, and hopefully some of the chalk still rolls a little bit. We've been on this chalky streak in the last couple of months, so hopefully it continues for me, at least on this fight, because I think there's a couple of other dogs barking on the rest of this card. Next up, we've got Yana Santos, and she is taking on Chelsea Chandler. This fight is way better than people are giving it credit for here, Aaron. It's a lot higher up the card, I think, than a lot of people are expecting. And a lot of people kind of roll their eyes at the women's MMA and that kind of thing. Yana Santos is on hard times, 0-3 in her last 3 fights. So I understand why people would think that. But frankly, when you dig into it a little bit, this thing should be fun. Yana has been around for a long time. Somehow she's still only 34 years old. I thought she was older than that. I really did. But you get away from that 3-fight losing streak. She's 2-4 in her last 6. So it's not quite as bad as it looks surface level. She was the victim of the new mom fade. You know, if these women take a break, they go off, they have a child. Generally, they come back and it takes them a little bit to get going again, especially when it comes to a combat setting. Well, let me tell you, she is coming back, and I think she is ready for this fight, Aaron. If you guys have prowled the Instagram a little bit for Yana, she is in some kind of shape right now. I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous, the physique that she is rocking at this point. Her opponent, Chelsea Chandler, she's 6-2. She's a 33-year-old wrecking ball. This chick reminds me of Molly Meatball McCann up a couple of weight classes. Like, she just wants to come forward and huck bombs, be bigger, be stronger. And I really think that she's going to be the recency bias spot of the card, because a lot of people are expecting her to roll through busted, old, washed Yana Santos. But the fact is, Yana's more talented than this girl everywhere. And Chelsea Chandler can't make weight. You know, she fights at 135 pounds in the UFC, and she's never once made 135 pounds, Aaron. She fought at 145 against Dumont, where she gave us one of the best memes MMA has to offer, where she was sprinting across the cage to get away from Norma Dumont. She fought at a 140 catch weight against Julija Stolyarenko, and then she blew it and missed weight when she fought Nunes. She was 2 pounds heavy coming into that fight. Never once has she actually gotten down to 135 pounds. She's a big girl. She's going to be about 2 inches taller based on the numbers here, but she's only got a 33% takedown defense. And she gets tired in these fights, Aaron. She throws heavies early, and when she doesn't get her opponent out of there, she just kind of falls apart. You know, she was able to hang on to Nunes, but this Nunes is the smallest fighter in the weight class. No idea why she's not fighting down at 125 pounds with the stature that she has. So she was massively outsized in that spot, and Chandler was able to just kind of get her back and hang on for dear life and hold her in that spot. You know, Yana Santos very legendarily won a fight where in round 3 her back was taken, and she was just absolutely beating the brakes off of Ketlin Vieira, who had her back at the time. She won a round being controlled because Ketlin Vieira was hanging on, and Yana was just beating her to a pulp from that position. She was willing to do something. She was willing to attack. She was willing to move, and she had the energy to do it. She's always had a great gas tank. I think this is a spot where Yana Santos is rightfully so the favorite. She's getting a huge step down in competition. I think all the shine has come off of Chelsea Chandler at this point. It's close to a pick'em. Minus 135 Santos, plus 115 Chelsea Chandler. And I think a lot of people are going to fall for that plus 115, thinking that Chelsea's just going to walk through her. The fact is, I think there's a lot of fight left in Yana Santos at this point in her life. And even just going back a couple of fights, her training and working with Thiago the way that she has, her husband, Thiago Santos, for those of you guys who aren't putting 2 and 2 together there, she looks better in her last couple of fights. You know, I noticed she stands heavier on her feet. She puts a lot more emphasis into her kicks. You go back, a couple of years before she had the kid, and she was always off balance. Her feet always got close together. She could get toppled over really easily. It seems like she's kind of absorbing some of Thiago into her fighting style as they continue to work and train together. And frankly, I think that's going to make her a lot more effective. It's going to be close. It's going to be greasy, but Santos will put up more volume. Santos is the more skilled fighter. Santos has the better grappling. Santos has the better cardio. I think Joanna's rightfully so the favorite, and I might actually bet her here.
I agree with you again. Like I just don't
Let's
really see.
go.
I just don't really see a great path for Chelsea Chandler because it's not like Yana Santos hasn't faced like these plodding pressure fighters before, and I think that Yana's just going to be a much faster, and I think that'll matter. You know, she's not going to. Chelsea Chandler's big. Like she's like got a lot of bulk for the division, and she hits hard, and I think that that is something that can sway judges for sure. And I think this is a fight that's going to go to the scorecards, and that always kind of worries me in these kind of spots where again. I don't think that there's going to be a finish. I don't think that either fighter is going to necessarily be landing the more definitively stronger strikes. But I think that based on that, I think we're going to see Yana just have more volume. And I think she'll still land. And I also think that she can mix it up with takedowns, which is something that could really tire Chelsea Chandler out, like you mentioned kind of at the beginning of your preview there. I'm with you. I think that Yana Santos is the side here. Not much more to say about it. I think that you kind of covered all the bases that I would have touched on myself.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had a lot to say on that one, Aaron. I dug deeper on that one than probably a sane person should. So I had a lot to go for that one. And again, much like the Karl Rosa situation, guys, I might actually sprinkle a Yana round 3 in this spot, believe it or not. Chandler's tough to get out of there. I'm waiting for Friday. I want to see if she makes weight or not. You know, we all know when these fighters miss by a half pound or 1 pound, they really suck themselves down to try to make weight. That's the one that hurts. That's the one that sucks. That's the one that might hamper their performance because they gave it their all. They gave it everything they had to try to make weight. If Chandler comes in 5 pounds over and Yana's, just tough enough to take the fight anyway, maybe stay away. But because she didn't suck herself down. She didn't try. She didn't bother. She's going to have extra weight. She's going to have extra cardio. She'll be feeling good in the cage on Saturday. But if she misses by 1 or 2 pounds again, something like that, or God forbid, if she makes weight, Aaron, I'm actually going to like that more for Santos because I think Santos's cardio is going to be kind of the story here. And I wouldn't be surprised, especially if this fight looks anything like the Nunes fight and Chandler's last fight, the way she was laying on the ground, just heaving, trying to get air in her lungs. Yana will not let her off the hook in that situation. You could see the mercy stoppage TKO that we were talking about, because if Yana gets on top of her, she's going to elbow her to hell in that position and never let her get away. So I may be looking at a round 3 sprinkle, believe it or not, on Yana Santos.
Yeah, I wouldn't blame you for that one. I think that's, and I like your take. If she actually makes weight, it might even be a better situation.
I think it's worse for her if she makes weight.
Yeah, very possible.
She's one of the victims of the 145-pound division getting shut down. You know what I mean? She does not belong at 135.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that she certainly ends up being a casualty of that, no doubt.
For sure. All right, guys, we've got just a couple of fights left to break down what is currently your co-main event, at least for the time being. Maybe they could leave it. I'm fine with this being the co-main event. Chepe Mariscal takes on Damon the Leech Jackson. And Aaron, I've had a tough go of it with my guy Chepe. He has gotten me in the short shorts more times than I would like to admit in his short stint here in the UFC. I pointed out everything awesome and great about Chepe. And then I said, you know what? At the end of the day, though, I think the UFC really likes Trevor Peek. And I drastically overestimated how hard Trevor Peek hit. I thought Peek was going to get into a brawl with this guy and the power would shine and that would be the difference. And the well-rounded nature and durability of Chepe really was the story of that fight. So he got me. And then in the next fight, when they matched him up with Jack Jenkins, I went, gotcha. I got you this time. I'm going to get you on this one. And I have a bet on Jack Jenkins. Well, one of those fluky situations where something crazy happens in a fight, they go into a grappling scramble, and Chepe hits a whizzer really hard, gets an underhook, and blows out the elbow of Jack Jenkins, who was looking like he was on his way to winning that fight. And I could not believe it. It's like, you got to be kidding me. Even when I've got this man dead to rights, he finds a way to rob me blind. Well, you know what? Third time's the charm. I bet Morgan Charrier in that fight, and Aaron, looking back on the way that fight went to this day, I believe the decision went the wrong way. I really think Morgan won that fight. It was the best fight of his career. He looked incredible. Granted, it was close, so I can't complain that badly, but I'm 0-3 against Chepe, and I feel like I should be 2-1 instead. But it's crazy because I'm going to bet on him this week. This is the fight where I feel like his skill set really is going to shine. Damon Jackson just got KO'd flat by the guy I used to describe Chepe. I feel like Chepe is a Dan Ige minus. You know what I mean? He's just, you take Dan Ige and you take just a little edge off, and that's Chepe. And I'm not meaning that insultingly. He's got incredible cardio. He's got great durability. The guy can wrestle. He's hard to submit. He's got good hands. He's got good power. I don't know if he's top 10. So he's a little lower on the bar than Ige, but that's exactly the guy I want fighting Damon Jackson. I bet on Dan Ige. I bet on Dan Ige by KO. I love Damon Jackson. I'm a fan. I really am. He's one of those gritty, hardworking, tough guys that hung around not necessarily because of physical talent, but because he was willing to put the grind in, because of his brain, because of his mind, his game plans. I'm a huge fan of Damon Jackson. And he caught me sleeping and gave me shit when I picked against him a couple of times on Twitter. So got to love when the fighters come after you that way. But I'm picking against him again here in this spot, Aaron, because I think the durability is starting to show cracks again. I've talked about how he's been rocked and hurt a bunch of times, and some of these guys just can't quite follow up and get him out of there. Kamala Kirk had him in trouble. You're never going to be in trouble against guys like Charles Rosa and Pat Sabatini. Alexander Hernandez, I thought, had him in trouble a couple times, but he managed to squeeze that one out. Chepe's not going anywhere. I think Chepe will keep on coming. He'll have the cardio to compete for a full 15 minutes. He's not going to get blanketed by a guy like Damon Jackson. I think eventually Chepe finds the button and does kind of the same thing Dan Ige did. So I'm thinking a round 2, round 3 TKO.
I kind of like the over in this fight. Like, I think fight goes to decisions, even money. And personally, I think that this one goes. You talked about him being kind of Ige light, and I think the reason why he's Ige light is he doesn't have that same great equalizer that Dan Ige has. He's got great cardio. He's going to push you 3 rounds. He's going to put the pace on you. I just don't think he has the same power as a Dan Ige has. And Damon Jackson is a guy that hasn't been stopped that often. For some reason, it's always in my head like him getting finished a lot. But he rarely does. I think how many times he actually got knocked out by Ilia Topuria. So, I mean, that's, not necessarily.
4 KO losses.
Yeah, so 4 Movlid Khaibalayev, champion. Ilia Topuria, champion. Dan Ige is Dan Ige. And Kevin Aguilar. I mean, Kevin Aguilar didn't have a great UFC run, but he was great in LFA.
I thought he was going to be better than he was. I'm sad about Kevin
I think almost everybody did. But at the same time, I think that, I don't think I see Mariscal putting Damon Jackson out. I do think it's not a great matchup for Damon Jackson, but at the same time, Damon Jackson has overachieved on so many different situations where he people count him out, and he is just so gritty and tough and durable and versatile that he's able to find ways to win. His grappling is so sneaky that, if Chepe makes one wrong move, suddenly the leech has his back. These are things that can happen in this fight. I would rely on this fight going over 2.5. I think it's minus 125 for the over 2.5. That's probably the way that I would look at it. But at the same time, I do kind of agree with a lot of what you're saying. I think that if you're going to pick a side, that Mariscal is the side. But again, I'm not the kind of guy that wants to count out Damon Jackson. So I think I'm going to look more towards time props than anything else in this fight.
Okay. That's totally fair. I think that makes some sense. I do think that Damon's just getting a little bit long in the tooth, and you got to wonder how those types of L's start to wear on the psyche after a little bit, especially when you get a little bit older. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's an interesting spot. Damon Jackson could try to, body triangle this guy and ride out the clock and wet blanket him, that kind of thing. I just think Chepe's got the counter grappling and gas to not fall victim to that. Overs may be the look. You might be onto something there. Yeah, I think we said it all on that one, Aaron. I think we're kind of seeing the same way on that one. All right, guys.
You said possibly round 2 finish, so under is in play in your mind, I guess, a little bit more than it is in mine. But hey, I mean, it's fighting, and Chepe Mariscal is a tough guy, trains at elevation. I think that it's going to be an interesting fight.
Yeah. I think it'd be more of an accumulation. You know what I mean? As the takedowns fail, and as the fight gets extended, and Damon Jackson is kind of forced to strike with Chepe for extended periods, that's when I think the KO could come, from extended boxing attacks and stuff like that, getting caught in transition, that kind of thing. I don't think it's going to be a one-hitter quitter. Obviously, he doesn't have near the power of a Dan Ige, but that's why I'm thinking kind of a late, round 2, maybe a round 3 type of situation, because it's not going to come with a one punch early or anything like that.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. All right, guys. Main event time. Marcin Tybura versus Serghei Spivac 2. One of those rematches where you just kind of go, why? you know,
Well,
I don't
everybody's
get it.
excited about Volkov versus Gon right now, and Gon dominated that fight. So, like how many heavyweights are there that are ranked right now? Like you pick these guys out of a hat, they're going to end up fighting each other once again at some point. Like I'm not saying that this is a great main event, so to speak, but I understand them doing the rematch at this point in time. Tybura won the last time. Spivac is under 30 right now. He's shown a lot of improvement. Where's Tybura at? I kind of get it as a matchup. I just think people aren't that excited about it being 5 rounds.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. And to be fair, though, Volkov didn't have his hair combed correctly in the first fight with Gon.
That's
So I
fair.
think
That's
a
fair.
lot's different.
I
A
didn't think
lot is
about that.
different
That's a fair point.
Yeah, man. It's I get it. I get it. They're trying to kind of build up Serghei Spivac. He's the young guy here in this spot. Marcin Tybura is 38 years old at this point. But man, Aaron, I got to tell you, 38 at heavyweight is like 32 in any other division. Like you're still on the edge of your heavyweight prime at that point. You're not phased out yet. You've got a couple of good fights still left in you. You're just not that old. These guys hang around a whole heck of a lot longer. I have had a rough go of it with Marcin Tybura. Very much the way of Andrei Arlovsky, right? I thought this guy's chin was donezo, back in 2019 when he was getting KO'd in every single fight. This scrub is going to go home. He's going to get dropped from the UFC. He's not meant for it anymore. And then he rattles off this crazy run. He does an incredible job of protecting himself. He relies heavily on the grappling. He works the cardio. He cooks you late. And then even when he does run into some power strikers or some guys with big power and explosiveness, he just rides them out. The Romanov fight where you knew it was going to be a 10-8 round one. Didn't matter. He just did what he needed to do, got to round 2, and then took over. His only loss by knockout since that bad run back in 2019 is Tom Aspinall. That's the champion, folks. Like, you can't even knock him for getting knocked out by Tom Aspinall. Tom knocks everybody out. Like, big shock, right? He fought Tai Tuivasa and got him out of there in round 1. I was convinced Tai Tuivasa was going to be the one to finally put a stamp on Marcin Tybura. I thought he would finally kind of revive those chin concerns. Wrong again. Man, Serghei Spivac, though, 16-4, 29 years old. He's training out of Extreme Couture, it looks like, working a lot with Francis Ngannou recently, which obviously great place to be for a young heavyweight to be coming up. We haven't seen him since he lost to Cyril Gane. It was about a year ago at this point that happened. And the big problem I've got with Serghei is it seems like he just kind of folds up shop, man. He's a big monster grappler. He likes to take people down. He's got shocking judo tosses for a big man. But when it's not going his way, he is not a good nail. You go back to the first time they fought. And I know, again, this was years ago. You got to give credit. The kid's gotten much, much better since 2020, I'm sure. But when he wasn't able to blast double Tybura, he didn't have a plan B. He looked out of sorts and uncomfortable on the feet. He ended up giving up a takedown himself, and he had no answers off of his back. It was a real unfamiliar territory there for him. And when he struggled getting Cyril Gane down to the mat, it was the same thing. You saw that same wide-eyed, fearful look in his eyes that he just knew it was a matter of time. He knew what was coming. There wasn't a damn thing he could do about it. That kind of scares me. When you've got a guy that will settle in and just go, you know what? This ain't going to go my way. I don't want that. I don't want my money on that. That is not a person that I want to put any type of action on. So this line really doesn't make a lot of sense to me, Aaron. It's almost like the first fight of the night that we broke down on this card. Marcin Tybura won the first fight. And I know he's older, but he's plus 125. You can get minus 145 on Serghei Spivac. A lot of people this week I see loving them some Serghei Spivac. And this line is starting to grow because of that. But frankly, I'm missing it. I'm going, what is different about Serghei Spivac? It seems like his hands have gotten a little bit better. Sure, okay, I'll give you that. But if this is a 15-minute kickboxing matchup, does he deserve to be that big of a favorite over Tybura?
25-minute kickboxing match, yes.
Thank you for the correction, my friend. If this is a 25-minute kickboxing match, is he a favorite over Tybura kickboxing? I'm not sure that he is. And then if he gets on top of Tybura, okay, sure, he's the favorite, but when has wrestling or grappling ever worked on Marcin Tybura? I can't think of a single time. You can't take the guy down. You can't keep the guy down. He will find his way on top of you. And on top of that, he's very measured with his approach. He never overextends. He's got cardio for days. And if you do have that nuclear power, sure, you can touch him on the button and get him out of there. But like I said, Tom Aspinall's been the only guy to knock him out since 2019. I don't think Serghei Spivac is suddenly some power puncher. He's a ground and pound guy. He'll take you down, wear you out, and then when you're helpless and you give up, he'll beat you up on the ground. I look back at some of the numbers, and Aaron, I don't usually do this. I'm not the crazy stat guy. You know what I mean? I'm not the guy that digs in deep on some of this kind of stuff, but I was curious about something. Serghei Spivac has never landed less than 3 takedowns in a win, except for his fight with old man Alexei Olenek. That's the only fight in the UFC where he scored less than 3 takedowns. Every single other time he's been held under 3 takedowns, it's a loss.
Yeah, and
Do
Spivac,
you see him taking
I should mention that
3 times?
I think in the Olenek fight also, Olenek pulled guard because Spivac's credited with 5 minutes of control in that fight too.
Yes. And we know Olenek is more than happy to go on the
Yeah.
on his back and try and look for that scarf hold and all that kind of stuff.
Kill chokes, yeah.
I miss that guy. Alexei Olenek was my dude. But so my question really in this spot comes down to, does Serghei Spivac get 3 or more takedowns in this fight? Because till this point, he has not proven to me that he can beat a non-retirement age heavyweight without getting 3 or more takedowns. I don't think he can. I don't think he does. And I'm not sure training with Francis Ngannou suddenly means he's got the same type of power in boxing that he's going to win this thing on the feet. I think the line's going the wrong way, Aaron. I'm kind of dog or pass on this main event. I think Marcin goes 2-0 against Serghei Spivac. Talk to me, man. What do you think about this one? It's a very interesting fight.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, I'll ask you a question here. Do you remember what the scorecards were the first time they fought?
Ooh, I want to say it was 29-28, but I'd have to go back and look.
30-27 twice for Tybura, 29-28.
Wow. Okay.
It was a dominant fight. It was a dominant win for Tybura. And I don't think that Tybura, I think that Spivac's gotten better, but I certainly don't think that Tybura's gotten worse since then. And I think that his skill set, it's still a matchup situation where it's matchup for matchup. And I just like Tybura here. I think that Tybura wins this fight more often than not. I think that he gets more takedowns than Spivac, and I think that that's going to frustrate Spivac. And Spivac is a guy, like you said, when he starts getting behind in a fight, he's not the guy that's going to rally back. It's just never been him. So I think that unless he's able to control this fight throughout for as long as it goes, which I don't think is going to be the case against a guy like Tybura, who's not typically the nail in these fights, unless, like you said, fitting a Tom Aspinall. I just don't see that happening. So I'm with you on Tybura here at underdog money. To me, he dominated the first fight, and I think that there's a better chance that he dominates this fight than he loses this fight. I think that you could probably get I think it's plus 350 for the Tybura decision here. And I don't think he's necessarily going to put Spivac out. But also, if you look at a submission, maybe the late round submission props, around 4 or 5 submission for Tybura, you think of maybe an arm triangle or something like that, where Spivac just runs out of ideas.
Now we're talking.
Now it's we're talking plus 2,800 or something like that, probably, if I had to guess. That's probably the area code where I would be looking at maybe a couple sprinkles on Tybura late. But I think that Tybura wins this fight more often. And I'm with you again. I think that we're pretty aligned on this card for the most part. I think that the parts that we are kind of on opposite ends of, we kind of understand each other's perspective on it for the most part. We don't necessarily maybe on the Karl Williams side, that's probably the biggest.
That's probably our biggest disagreement.
Point of contention between us so far. But you don't lose money. You don't win money by betting against Karl Williams so far. So I think in this situation, I'm more confident with my angle, but we'll see how that goes on Saturday. But I think that we've been pretty aligned for tonight. And I think that you're right. There are kind of some weird lines on this fight, on this card. And that often is kind of scary for me, because when you think a line is weird, you're maybe people know something that I don't. And
it feels like you're missing something.
Yeah, it feels like you're missing something where you're why is, even Yana Santos being that small of a favorite, I'm why? Am I missing something here? But at the same time, I think that we're kind of on the same page with a lot of these.
Yep. We agreed a lot on this card. And as you guys know, as always, the guest and I don't prep. We don't trade notes before the fight. These are our reads. We come and break it down for you, give you all the information we can, tell you what we're betting, and you guys can do what you want to with that type of information. So I feel great that we're aligned on a lot of these spots, Aaron. I think this is a better card to bet and make money than a lot of the ones previously have been. I do want to warn a couple people, though. There are some landmines. I don't feel like, even though I'm literally doing this, I'm parlaying up some favorites. I think there's going to be some parlay busters this week. I do think there's going to be some volatility. I think we're going to see a couple of dogs bust their way through in some of these spots. So be careful out there. Watch the chalk you're laying. My favorite leg, as always, is the anchor, Youssef Zalal. I think he's the one that you can really count on if you want to find some spots that are good and solid. But the rest of the card, be wary. There's definitely some situations where the numbers don't make a ton of sense. Aaron, thank you so much for joining me here on the pod today. And if there's anything that you want to shout out, if you've got content coming up, or you want to just tell the people where they can support you, that kind of thing, definitely want to give you a minute to go ahead and do that.
Yeah, you can just go to www.aaron.report. I made it easy for everybody. It's my link tree with all of the different links to my work, my social media platforms, all of that. So it's just aaron.report in your browser.
Okay, beautiful. Well, thank you guys so much for being here this evening. Hit the like button on your way out. We are just cracking it. It's beautiful, Aaron. Right at the end of the show, we hit 1,005 live viewers. So we beat that triple-digit mark at the bottom of the ninth. Thank you guys for being here. And do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already to the home of fight. We're going to blow this dang thing up. We're on a rocket ship to the moon here in this spot. We're going to do the total takedown on Thursday. Of course, the undefeated post weigh-in show on Friday. And then we're just going to absolutely crush this dumpster fire Apex card this week, you guys. I'm calling it. I'm ready for it. Big cash coming this week.
Does anybody else have any other stupid questions for me tonight? Thank you. Have a good night.
That'll do it, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you again, Aaron. And of course, let's roll.